Bonjour à tous.
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry. First of all, welcome. It's a real pleasure to see you all here in this amphitheater for this sequence dedicated to the relationship between work and well-being. And well-being at work, that's a topic that is very much discussed today. New technologies change the relationship we have with work. And beyond all this, we had the pandemic, which of course shook up our habits and certainties. In short, in a nutshell, it's never been more important to understand what determines well-being at work. And this is what we're going to talk about for an hour. And with us, we have the pleasure to have Émilie Guimarães, President of ONET, Alexandre Preti, Director General of MALT, Jean-Paul Juliat, Director General of BREAD, Arnaud Bessier, co-founder and CEO of International SOS, and we are happy to welcome Professor at the University of Tokyo, Noriko Nayagawa. Thank you very much for being with us to discuss this topic. You were invited by the Cercle des Économistes, and Ms. Moreno-Galbis will do the introduction, talk about this challenge. The floor is yours. Thank you, Marie. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us this afternoon for this session. As Marie said, it's really a hot topic, given what's happened in the recent months, the importance of the well-being of people at work, especially for those who have to work longer. So there's double interest in this topic. At the macro level, political decision makers, the objective is to maximize the well-being of the citizens. And within this scope, we spend 50% for those who are active. 50% of our time is spent working. So it's important that we're happy. And at the micro level, at the corporate level, it's a satisfied worker is someone who will be more productive, more creative, with a more pro-social behavior, ready to cooperate. And so with this double perspective, the micro and macro, well, this justifies how interesting it may be to analyze all this. But today we're going to talk about a new relationship. What did we have before? What's new? Since the 1980s, we've observed that well-being, satisfaction at work has never stopped diminishing. It's dropping. And despite the rise in salaries and wages. But what's happening? There's this paradox, and we researchers try to find the factors that would justify this paradox, this evolution. So there's the financial aspects and the new ways and the new wages that are paid, that value, graduation based on effort. This can have a negative effect, but non-financial aspect, working conditions. When we talk about work conditions, we talk about some impacts that where we see that sometimes it plays favorably for the happiness, autonomy, the size of the company. That's very important. The smaller the company, the happier the workers are. Other conditions play negatively, and that would be, of course, physical risk, psychological impacts, and also authoritarian vertical management systems. And why do we say what's happening today? There's a new relationship. And this new relationship comes from the fact that since 2020, the organization of labor has changed totally. Today, we have 50% of employments will be remote work. We can think it's positive. Someone who works remotely, well, has more autonomy by definition, may be made more responsible, eventually bring together the professional life and private life. And the first results are still very recent. But they show that the remote workers, they see a degradation of their mental health because it's not all positive remote work. You have to interiorize that there's some negative aspects like isolation. We lose the social aspects like the relationship you have with colleagues. Sedentarity also. Nobody to help you if you have a problem. Your colleagues won't be with you at home. Lack of recognition of the work done. Maybe a mix of professional and private life, no separation. So new factors, a new organization that will have an impact on our relationship to work. And that's why we talk about a new relationship of well-being at work. So this is it. Thank you very much. in a nutshell. Thank you, Eva, a lot in what you just said. So we'll try to talk together several of the aspects you raised. So, Alexandre Guedy, first of all, can you tell us to what extent the pandemic, because we're talking about a new relationship to work, how the pandemic led to a new foundation of how we think of work? Yes, I think it was mentioned by Eva, and I think there's one figure that was striking. I don't know if you saw it at the Jean Jaurès Institute that carried out a study with IFOP on the level of importance of work in the life of French people between 1990 and 2021. 1990, 64% of the French people estimated that work was very important in their work, and it's 20%, 60% to 20% in 2021. And so in the recent years, this figure dropped, linked to the pandemic and what Eva mentioned. When I analyze the pandemic period, for example, through my role as the head of a company and what we lived through our organizations, we see that we had workers who all asked for more freedom, more flexibility, less rules, more remote work, more collaborative benefits, and we see that the strength relationship was more on the worker side than on the employer side. And we got to the point where we have an individualization of work. And so we have now a consumer worker to deal with. So is this a good thing? Well, it was mentioned earlier, maybe yes, in the short term, in the short run, but not in the long run. Another observation I made personally in my company, we have 700 employees. Each month I bring together all my collaborators and we have questions that are asked. When I did the same exercise 10 years ago, 60% of the questions were on the strategy of the company, corporate strategy. Today, 3/3 of the questions. 1/3 is what I call me, myself, and I. Can you do more? Can we have a 4-day week? May I have more days of remote work? That's the first third. The second third are the impact issues, difficulty of inclusion. What do you do as an employer to be better on the inclusion? And 1/3 of the questions on the corporate strategy. And so it shows something very deep, in-depth change. And what it was said, what's very good for the individual is not necessarily good for the collectivity. And that's why nobody has a crystal ball or a magic wand. We don't have a final vision to say if what's happened is good or bad, but we feel that for the personal commitment and the corporate interest, what we've done in the 4 or 5 years is not always good in terms of result and impact. We don't have a lot of, this is recent, it's too recent to know, but well-being at work, is it more efficiency in the end? Thank you, Marie. I think that in fact, I'm personally convinced that it's a lot more efficiency. My name is Jean-Paul Julia from Bread, the Bread Bank. So today we're in a world where that's more individualistic. If you don't understand why you're there and what's your usefulness, what you're used for, you're not as good. I need teams personally that are more autonomous, more reactive, have a capacity to say, okay, there's a process that doesn't work well, and when I can say that there's a process that doesn't work, I have the capacity to question my own self and be more courageous, more audacious. So, you know, if I have a team where I have courage and all this, I need confidence. And to have confidence and to know where you're going, people need comfort and a quality of life. And in reality, when you manage to do this, well, it's not easy. We can discuss this later. What are the recipes? Oh, there's not only one, but if you have quality of life, comfort, the teams enter a virtuous circle, and they take power. 20 years ago, I thought that everything was, better when everything had been carefully reflected upon. But today, we're good with what's aligned with what we think, our heart, and probably our stomach. And when the people in the field clearly understand what they do, why they do it, well, you have to give them the key. And to give them the keys, the responsibility, they have to be well. And the better they are, the more virtuous the circle is. I'll give you an example. I'm in the bank. I have commercial objectives. In the bank I directed earlier on, before this job. So we'll talk about the objectives will come from the field. And we had 3 times the result. So an economic benefit, because we asked the basis to bring up their objectives. So, you International SOS, you're present in 90 countries. What we just described, this new relationship between well-being and work, is it specific to France, or I imagine the answer is no, but can you give us nuances, talk about this worldwide? Well, first of all, we're really in the middle of the river. We have productivity gains with hybrid types of work, but now we all wonder, and the question varies from one continent to the other. One thing that's striking, we see our teams in Asia, for example, and we have roughly 5,000 people, 1/3 of our staff in Asia, and the teams in Asia all came back to work at the office, 5 days a week or 4 days a week, and a certain number of my peers tell me that the Asian competitiveness will benefit from that, because despite all, collaboration, as Eva mentioned it, innovation, mentoring, all this is done at work, at the office, together, as a collectivity. Now, will the quality of life suffer? Well, what's sure is that if we take Asia, there's a continent where the children work harder, and today the salaried workers have come back to the office. In the U.S., it's the opposite. To bring back the employees at work at the office is very complicated in California, New York, or Houston. It's difficult. People want to stay at home. They want to work remotely. They want to be at the office 1 day or 2 days out of 5. Europe is in the middle, especially in France, where the 3-2 is the general fashion today. Never forget that it creates inequality, because part of the workers can benefit from this hybrid form of work, and part of the jobs are not meant for that. And there's a society that's being divided with the people who feel it as an advantage to work outside of the office, compared to people who have to be on site 5 days a week. So I think we shouldn't neglect that. That's an important factor. I'm personally less enthusiastic with hybrid work. It will stay, of course, because it's a demand, it's a request from employees. The first question when you hire new people in Europe or in the US, it's what's your work schedule? But obviously it has to be managed in a tighter fashion, and think of what we do with the younger generations. I'll give you an example. I managed 2 schools in Great Britain. Post-COVID, the numbers of incivilities in these 2 schools, we're talking about private schools, like where you have some French students, a lot of French students who are obviously well educated, but the level of incivilities has grown. The isolation due to COVID is a real issue. I think that for adults, being isolated outside of the office will have consequences. And one statistic that we have in all our assistance centers in the world is that the psychological problems have increased by 25%. 25% more calls related to psychological problems, about 35% more leave of absence related to psychological issues. And this is also related to the different crises. So I think we have to establish a distinction between what's related to hybrid work with a view of the anxiogenic situation in the world, perma-crisis in the world, successive crises in the world that are overimposed, the climate, sanitary, geopolitical, name it, which cause stress for the employee and the employers. Mr. Naganawa, this issue of well-being at work, does it exist in Japan? How is it translated? How is it materialized? How are things going between the employees and their employers in companies in Japan?
Can I hear? I'm speaking English, and in Japanese society, the relationship between the companies and the individuals are drastically changing now. There are mainly 2 reasons. One is, of course, the pandemic experience. As all of you said, that even in Japan, that we have experienced a very heavy coronavirus pandemic situation, so that the people has to work using online and remote works experiences. That's changed our working style. And another reason is the more fundamental problems. traditionally in Japanese society, the companies employs their workers by long-term relationship. We call the lifetime employment. So that's the company is just a community that each individual belongs to. So that's they devote their effort to enhance the productivity or the company's growth for so their future life. And the company has a responsibility to sustain their life and their future. So if this positive correlation is working, so this is good for Japanese society. So in some senses, that's this type of long-term relationship was an engine of Japanese high growth rate. But unfortunately, this was unsustainable because that the companies experienced very heavy shocks of the outward competitive situations, so that some companies has experienced a bankrupt, and they cannot sustain the workers' life. So that's the relationship between the companies and each individual has changing. So each individual has opinion to make their life by themselves and consider the future of life or future of work-life balance and the future of their value of quality of life, so each individual. So this kind of the fundamental change and the experience of corona pandemic situation, so nowadays Japanese workers are changing their mind and they are considering searching the new relationships between the companies and the individuals. And on the company side, they are going to reconstruct the relationship between the individuals of the companies. Even still, the long-term relationship is still important. So they are going to make a kind of long-term relationship, but simultaneously they want to enhance the quality of life of each workers and enhance the well-being of each workers. So one situation is making the more flexible work style, as I said. On the other hand, the main purpose of company and the main purpose of each individual are not consistent in general. So the Japanese companies try to unify their different purposes. So they try to change, each company tries to change their purposes to consistent with the purposes of individuals. Of course, the purposes of individuals are different from person to person, but by organizing some kind of communication within the company, they try to unify and organize a good company's purpose to enhance the welfare of the workers. That is the new aspect of Japanese society.
Merci beaucoup pour votre témoignage qui nous montre bien que le sujet dépasse largement les frontières, non seulement de la France, mais de...
This shows that this topic crosses boundaries. Emilie Mandarez, it was mentioned before, remote work divides society, creates inequalities. And you experience that on a daily basis because your jobs cannot be turned in remote work, but they are ultra important. So how remote work being one of the elements for the well-being of individuals, how do you respond to this request, this demand, when you can't offer remote work to your employees? Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about our trades. Our trades are essential. We're in the corporate cleaning, in fact, and maintenance. For us, inequalities are not necessary at work. Our trades, the ONET Group is a service company, engineering and service. We work directly at our clients' premises, cleanliness, airport assistance, maintenance, even in the nuclear industry, and 90% of our teams are directly on site at our client sites every day. So this issue of remote work is important for us, but it's not applicable. And so if I go back on one element that you raised earlier, question for us is to know what is the degree of satisfaction we can have at work. I will not talk about well-being, but I will talk about how you can be well at work. So we see in all the surveys, the first demand is the sense of usefulness. Very strong challenge for us. And the second response we have is on personal development, how through my work I can develop myself, I can accomplish something, what is my path, what kind of evolution we'll have, and of course wages. Wages is a major stake for all our teams and employees. And so finally, the question for us is to wonder how in trades, we're in the backstage. We're present practically everywhere in all environments of your lives, all industrial environments, all leisure environments, and sports stadiums, hospitals, industry, office buildings. So how, when you're sort of like backstage, you see that today. When you're standing backstage, they expect that they won't see you. Nobody wants to see you. When things work well in our trade, we don't hear about us, We're invisible. And that was a real concern in our trade. How can we make our trades visible? In the cleaning sector, we worked a lot to try to understand how our work could be incarnated, how it could exist for the final user. 8 people out of 10 feel reassured when they see this personnel. 8 out of 10 like to see the security people. And we figured that was our challenge. We had to make our trades visible. How will this become concrete? Well, through an ambition of working during daytime hours. The more our agents are visible, the more valued they are. Their mission is valued. They will be recognized. They will be thanked. It's very important, something that no longer existed in France. But today we're happy to see that more and more our teams are greeted, they're thanked, and it's a major stake. And this value is seen through all kinds of gestures, the recognition of their mission. And when you ask the question to our teams feel more useful in their mission. When you do your job well, you're proud of what you do. And it's this feeling of pride on which we insist, and it's the way we see our trade. You talked about collectivity in the 4-day work week. It's a topic that is being discussed very in length. 4-day work week, is that a solution associated to well-being? On remote work, I love remote work. I love this principle for 3 reasons. First of all, it's a sign of trust. I accept that you work at home, I trust you. And when people work well, they work well at home as well as they do at work. So it's a sign of trust. And we have to take it into account, because all the young people we hire, they say they want to work from home. So we have to take this into account. And also changes the management approach, but I think we have to be careful, not too much. In a team, you have to have time together, spending time together. When I work remotely, when I start a meeting on Teams, I don't make jokes, I don't have a coffee together or tea, it's cold. I can't create a team when we're not together, when we don't have relationships at work or have arguments. You can't innovate when you're working remotely. So I think remote work is good, but we're just coming out of the trauma of COVID. I think we'll have to take a distance, find the right dosage, and maybe our company has to have an objective, and each manager inside the organization has to be able to say, over this limit, the team won't work well. So it's the role of the manager to strike the right balance. What is the finesse between collectivity and the individual?
Teleworking will provide some well-being at work, but there are more topics. So health at work is part and parcel of this process. Yes, you're right. This is my job, by the way. So I will defend my case. But when you question the employees, they want to be reassured in terms of health, in terms of security, and they want to get a well-being policy. So it's important to have practices whereby employees will get a better life, will live better. So we need to come up with a new approach to work, approach to office occupation. Going to work should be enticing. It should be based on collective efforts. So occupational clinics or health medical centers in companies are emerging in India, in the Philippines, and in many developing countries. We can see those health centers that are being developed. And the objective is to provide health offers and well-being to the employees. In the US, the companies pay for the costs of health. So for them, it's important for them to make sure that the employees are in good health. And in the US, there's a renewal of medical centers in the office campuses. It's quite paradoxical because there aren't too many employees in the office blocks now. But you need to take into account the new technologies in the field of mental health. Today, people should get an easy access to mental health services, so they should be able to manage their health. There are lots of digital offers now. You can conduct a digital health self-diagnosis. There are different methods to manage stress, to manage sleep, re-socialization. All of these digital methods were in their infancy 2 years ago, and they are very efficient. We provide our customers with digital tools, and they are outstanding. And in so doing, you can create a hotline. People can talk to psychologists. You can get access to therapeutic specialists, to doctors, to physicians, to psychiatrists, to psychologists. 82% of the employees want the implementation of full-fledged well-being policies at work. So it goes beyond hybrid work. How the companies should take that into account. And then you have compliance issues at stake. There's a 31030 ISO standard, whereby in health and safety there's a whole complete health policy. If you want to qualify for this ISO standard, so it's very concrete. So, of course, it's important to enable people to work from home, but not too much. Once you've created the health and security conditions at work, how do you acknowledge and value the skills and competencies for people? This is something that is important for employees. Alexandre Fréty, do you think that there's a need to value these skills and competencies? So back to the well-being of the employees, and allow me to make a link with the teleworking approach. We talked about a divide, a digital divide. There are some people who have access to digital technologies and those who don't have access to digital technologies. But I will give you an example. A boss in a consulting firm conducted analysis. Young consultants, after 2 years of experience, they are lagging 6 months behind versus those who worked remotely. In our companies, so in an open space, I visit some open spaces, and a 25-year-old, a newcomer, and he's alone. Where is the team? And the team members are working from home. There's a generational divide. When you are aged over 30 years of age and you've learned the basics in a physical world, that's quite unfair vis-à-vis the young people who are recruited. So basically, these people will be trained, but they will be alone. They will fend for themselves because their team members will be at home, working from home. So, of course, we have to work remotely. I'm working in the freelance business, so what is important is to work away from home or from home. So if I were to recruit people, the main asset that I highlight, these are different benefits, teleworking, working from home, the ability to work everywhere in the world. And of course, I can acquire some skills, but I cannot keep them. If I want to keep my skills, it's a matter of links. It's a matter of development. It's very difficult to square the circle because we want individual well-being. So it means that I need to be more remote from my company. At the other end of the spectrum, I will be committed if there is some meaning and development. Meaning is a very important word. So meaning, why am I here? Why my company? What is the purpose of my company? This has to do with the mission of a company. Where do I go? What is my career within the company? Where is my company going? Where is my company heading to? And then sensitivity. So impact and emotions. So the role that we have in the company today, we need to be able to be lenient. We can work from home, and so much the better. But if you consider the corporate project, it's a matter of creating links and developments. So it's very difficult to square the circle. And these young generations, they are quite contradictory because they want to be free. They want to have some leeway, fewer rules from management. They want to be trusted by managers. But the corporate and the corporate mission, the corporate project will make them stay in the company. The population that has some difficulty is the first-line managers. Between the devil and the deep blue sea, they have some people working from home and they don't want people to leave a company. And at the same time, they need to focus on development and meaning. So back to your question about skills and competencies. HR divisions will tell you that skills are more important than status. So there are lots of permanent contracts in some companies. And of course, companies will focus on skills and competencies. The average commitment of an employee in France is lower than the commitment of the freelance company. So the question of development of skills, career management in Japan, how is it managed? I will ask you another question. Do you understand all the difficulties, the circle, so to speak? Is it something that exists in Japan?
Yes, thank you for your questions. And even in Japan, the investment to the human capital, the skill development is very important aspect of Japanese society. As you said, that it has several important and difficult problems in Japan, but mainly that's but key point is that skill accumulation for aged persons, that is a very difficult task for Japan because in general, even in Japanese society or even in other countries, that basic human skill is accumulated by either young ages. When in the high school or universities, they engage in the human skill accumulations. But the change of the technology is very quick. So the environment or the working style changing. So the people has to adjust to the new environment by introducing the new technologies or new skills, new some kind of new knowledges. So then in Japan, the key word is now the reskilling for the companies or the recurrent education for the human capital or something. So even the Japanese government, the key word is the human capital to investment to human. So I'm a member of the advisory board of Japanese government for considering the economic policy. This point is very stressed. Because that in order to improve the wage rate, or in order to improve the redistribution point, it is necessary to increase labor productivity. Without change of labor productivity, sustainable growth of wage rate is difficult to attain. Or the changing the redistribution outcome is difficult by not changing the labor productivity. So the key point is the labor productivity by each individual. So the education or reskilling or investment to human capital is very, very crucial element for Japanese companies or Japanese society. So that is the reason that we stress the investment in the human capital. But how to do that? That is very difficult, important questions. So that Japanese government tried to support the by subsidy to each individual to enhance their reskilling. But it is still very small. But so that each individual or each company and the government, all of them try to increase the human capital in Japanese society. So for the Japanese company, sustaining their labor productivity and increase their well-being is a growth strategy. It's a long-run growth strategy for a Japanese company. So this is the investment for the future or future profit. So that is the main point for considering and by considering the Japanese policy. And try to improve the situation in Japanese company, and we get pushing the policy to improve the technological progress and simultaneously the human relationship between Japanese companies and workers and increase the labor productivity by investment to the human. That's my policy.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, on parle beaucoup de bien-être, mais...
Thanks a lot. We've talked about well-being, but Emily, we tend to associate work and the lack of well-being. So how can you square the circle? That's a big question. It's not an easy question that you've just flagged up. So the lack of well-being at work, Julia Tunes talked about that. She talked about happiness at work, and she told me this is not the role of a company to make people happy. So for well-being, this is personal. It depends on a balance between a work where I feel good and my personal well-being. So work cannot provide you with well-being only. But how do you feel good at work? You will feel good at work in terms of training and skills when you feel acknowledged, when you feel considered, when you feel recognized, the sense of being useful. So people will feel acknowledged when efforts are being put on you. So training is a pivotal when it comes to developing some skills and competencies. At UNET, we have some certificate-based career paths at all levels, and that's quite important to give some outlook to people. You have field people, cleaning specialists who can become heads of agencies with a certificate. So for those who can't do that, they should be supported. For example, people will work in an environment, and what is important is to focus on different jobs. It's a matter of being open-minded. So at UNET, we have a different profile of skills and competencies. We have engineers, we have officers, cleaning officers, security agents, maintenance agents, a wide array of profiles. That's quite unbelievable. But you can't move from one job to another overnight. But all along your career, what is at stake is how I can grow up in a department. And there are different career paths. You can become a manager. You talked about a threefold hierarchical organization in the corporate world. Is it a vision of the past? Not at all. I would say that it's a genuine perception of the organization of work in the companies. We have a hierarchy-based structure, so you can become a manager even though you work on the field. So you have first level management. So people should manage their teams, and at the same time, they need to listen to the strategy of a company, the instructions, where do we go, what is the labor framework, what are the labor conditions, and so on and so forth. So for me, there's something that is important regarding the role of the manager. The role of the manager is crucial. Today, it's very difficult to recruit managers at all levels. And why is it so difficult to hire them? It's very tough to manage people. So we had a panel discussion about the individualization of our companies, of our societies. It's very difficult to coordinate teams of people. So at Honnête, how can I coordinate people with different cultures, at different ages, with different generations of people, with different jobs? So it's a managerial challenge that is pivotal today in terms of the daily organization of the teams. So we put the pressure upon our managers, and we need to pay heed to that. We need to pay attention to that. For our managers, what do? We revisit their missions. What is your level of responsibility? You shouldn't be bombarded with lots of responsibility. You should get some leeway. So it's important to get a clear framework, hence better organization. And that's it. I pulled out in different directions, sorry, but that was interesting. So the role of managers is crucial, but at the same time, they should be backed, supported. We invest a lot in training, more than 20 million euros in the service-driven outlets. So these are full-fledged investments and efforts. We need to be aware of the difficulty of coordinating teams of people. At Honnête, we wage a battle. We will be successful if we continue to say that what is important is the team effort. We talked about human relationships. So if you want people to enjoy their work, there should be good relationships. Instead of having humans, if we have robots, no. We need robots, of course. We need digital technologies, but we need to help the teams. We need to make the work of our employees easier. People should feel a sense of being useful. You need to develop interpersonal relationships to find the right idea, the right solution for our customers, and with those daily practices, we'll be able to find some solutions. So a Q&A session maybe now. Where is the mic? Where's the mic? So we have 10 minutes ahead of us. So there are lots of people raising their hands, but there is no mic. So there are two ladies. A gentleman, ladies first. Okay. Thanks a lot for your observations. I'm Florence Gomez. So we know the bottom line, but people are less committed. You have lots of people suffering from burnout, lots of people absent from work, people are suffering from depressions. Of course, it is due to COVID, but to many other issues and problems. We've talked about different managerial levels in companies. Even in smaller companies, the top managers can be coached, they can be supported, but for middle managers and low managers, do they have these self-development tools? Because we've made that observation. So you talked about digital tools, but these digital tools are poorly used. I talk to managers. So what have you implemented in your companies to make sure that those problems are sorted out? So with International SOS, for the 15,000 employees, they have access to an app, Coalels. So it's a self-diagnosis tool. So the start of a personal treatment. or personal care of your own situation. Of course, the company doesn't get access to data and information. We talked about ill-being, discomfort in companies. This is a trend. This is a tangible situation because of the post-COVID situation, because of the outside environment. And corporate restructuring processes have gone unabated. So this is a trend, and this won't change in the future. So I think that changes have sped up, and I don't think that we'll be back to a stable period. So tools should be digital tools, but personal tools, customized tools. So managers should be taught how to decipher, to spot the signs. In France, we are fortunate because we have an occupational medicine system. So people should be trained. Again, doctors and physicians shouldn't do only checkups, but they should broaden their strategy. They need to think in terms of the employee and how he or she is relating to the company. So employees should feel that they are supported when they are in a bad patch. Mr. Julien, go ahead. That's fundamental. As far as I'm concerned, everything depends on the manager. And this is the most difficult job because we are dealing with human beings. And the leader has to lead by example, to set an example. So when I'm an employee, I will say, what is the meaning of my job? And I don't like incantations. What is important is to provide a framework. The clearer framework, the freer I am. For example, I prefer doing a job that is not smart with people that I like, rather than the opposite. But this is what I think. But it is not an all-encompassing truth, but I want to know what is my need, and I want other people to know what is my need and what is my truth. So the manager will say, why are you happy? Why aren't you happy? How can we make sure that things work together? So the employee should feel confident. But these are simple rules. But when these rules are applied, they're efficient. Go ahead, madam.
Bonjour à tous.
So good afternoon to all of you. So can you measure the well-being at work in your companies with all your employees? So how do you monitor well-being at work? This is a feeling. It's very impalpable. There are lots of issues we know are obligations, but it's very difficult to find the right path when it comes to measuring and gauging the policies that we've implemented in order to support people. Any solutions? Do you measure well-being at work? There are two answers. Of course, you need to measure the well-being at work. We are currently implementing a tool, an anonymous tool with lots of questions, and people can get some statistics. So, of course, I mean, we are 3 people in a department, but there are some tools that will enable you to get some statistics. And we have 2 pilot projects, and managers can feel how the teams are behaving. So there are some digital tools. And I would tell you something that is being said by my employees. At EURNET, things are going well in the field. When there is a good cooperation, the teams are happy, management is happy. We have some indicators. Accidents at work, lost time accidents are not really high. They are quite low. So it's a good indicator. Of course, you have lots of indicators. You need to listen to people. But of course, you need to get back to basics. So things are going well when you enable people to speak, when people get along. And Very often in the past, people were not able to express themselves, and these people felt constrained. So it's very difficult to make sure that people open up and speak. So we measure the NPS of the employee twice a year. The NPS of a company is 40, and for some teams, the NPS is 75, 0, or negative. So when you measure the well-being of the employees, you can focus on the structural causes. For example, the corporate canteen is not clean. And in terms of well-being, the most important thing is management. We have some targeted training programs for the managers who don't get along with a team. In France, we have a problem. Being a manager is a promotion. It is not seen as a skill. So it's important to choose the right people. It is one of the most important criteria. We are not all good managers. There are some people who want to contribute individually, and there are other people who want to work with others. We are in a company, in a society that promotes the manager. You have the 360-degree approach. A manager will be judged by the peers and by the people who report to him. This is what we do with our management system within the group, and this opens up some new avenues for the managers. From time to time, they are not trained and they don't think, or they don't know how they are perceived. And the 360-degree approach is very good and extremely remarkable.
Well-being is it measurable? Is it important? In an agency where I have a problem with well-being, my figures, my results just collapse immediately. I mean, it's something that is obvious. Now, if you have quick questions, maybe we can take two more questions. One in the back. At the back, do we have a microphone? Yes. 2 minutes, 21 seconds remaining in this session. Morning, good afternoon. Before talking remote work, I think we have to solve the issue of the digital difference. I think some young students and children have suffered a lot from the COVID. So how do you explain this? Thank you. It's dropping out of school. Now, how do you address this? Because of COVID, the children and the digital divide also. As a company, we try to establish connections with young people, with youth, with schools. And from the earliest stage, we try to create contacts through different programs with the schools to try to show what our trade is all about, what work is all about. It's not an immediate solution, but it's at our reach in terms of companies. But it's important that our enterprises reestablish a contact with youth and to show what our trades are all about. Last question. This is the last question. Yes. From Mrs. de Lombarès and Mr. Fretti, I was wondering to think about what is well-being in companies and with the generation divide. We are doing a survey on the social dialogue. Could we change that, the social dialogue? What kind of social dialogue could we think about? New social dialogue. It's a good question. Personally, I would love to review the social dialogue and rejuvenate it. I'm dealing with trade unions, with formal meetings, with a restrictive legal framework. If the new generation that you represent wants to find new methods or work on new methods to communicate inside the company, we're doing that already. Every 6 months, we use bottom-up results. You know, we ask our employees to react, but unfortunately, we are sort of like stuck in a framework, but I think we have to review the way our social dialogue takes place in our companies. So unfortunately, the session's over. We are out of time. Thank you for your active participation. Wish you the best for the rest of the meeting.